Okay, this is Caleb Westfeld and Gail Germanson, and I am interviewing Janice Liedtke as part of the Bayview Historical Society's 40th anniversary oral history project. It is currently the morning of March 25th, 2019, and we are conducting the interview at the Beulah Brinton House in Bayview in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Janice has agreed to participate and contribute to today's recording to the Bayview Historical Society's archival collection so that it may be preserved and available for future use as indicated on the deed of gift form. Janice, please be assured that we understand that your participation is fully voluntary and that we can take a break, postpone, or terminate the interview at any time at your request. We have a list of questions to get the discussion started, but you are welcome to decline answering any of these that you don't want to answer and answer others as you see fit. We have some specific topics that we want to cover, but mostly want to hear what you have to say about your experiences in Bayview. We have set aside an hour for the interview with the understanding that it may run slightly shorter or longer. We thank you for your time and willingness to share your stories with us, and with that, we will get started.
Okay.
Can you please state your name, where and when you were born, and where you currently live?
My name is Janice May Liedtke. My maiden name was Hansing. And I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and now I live at 402 East Montana Street in Bayview, across from Humboldt Park.
Okay. So you said you live in Bayview now, and you were born in Milwaukee. So you lived in Bayview most of your life then, or for how long?
Yes. I was about 4 years old when my parents moved into Bayview. And our first home was on Kinnickinnick Avenue in the 2900 block. And I lived in 8 different places in Bayview. My parents never owned their own home, and every time the rent was raised, they would move. So that's why we moved so often.
So you've lived in 8 total places since then, or when you were young, 8 times, or just overall?
Well, until I got married.
Oh, okay.
And that was in 1956.
Okay.
So, and then when we decided to buy our own home, I asked my husband if we could look at a house in Bayview, and he said, "Wherever you'll be happy is fine with me." And I said, "Oh, great." So we saw this house, and I found out that my mother's mother, my grandmother, always liked this particular house on the corner of Howell and Montana. And she was thrilled to find out that we bought the place, and of course then I had her come and visit, and she just loved sitting in the chair and, looking at Humboldt Park. So
you've been in the same house since the 1950s
yes.
then?
Well, 1961
okay.
is when we actually moved into
okay.
it. Yeah.
So being that you lived in so many different places in Bayview when you were growing up, I'm assuming you went to school in Bayview then?
Oh,
too?
yes. I started at Trowbridge Street School, and I went from kindergarten to 4th grade, and then we moved into the Fernwood School area, so I had to transfer over to Fernwood, and I went to school there. In those days, they had what they called 5B and 5A, 6B and 6A, and there were 2 periods that you could start school. One would be in January, and then one would be in September. And because my birthday was December 20th, I had to start school in the January term. So I went to Fernwood School through 5th grade until 8B. And then I transferred back over to Trowbridge Street School and graduated from Trowbridge. Then I went to Bayview High School for my last 4 years of education. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk at all about any specific memories from any of your school days, like starting
Well,
younger and then going older?
Yeah, I had been a dancer. My mother worked for a dentist in the building that's on Kinnickinnick and Lincoln Avenue. And on that second floor where the dentist was, there were other businesses. There was a music studio, a dance studio, and during the summertime, when the dentist went on vacation, my mother would actually go and clean his office. And I would just walk around. I was about 4 years old at the time. And I would walk around and stand at the doorway of the different businesses. Well, then when I saw there was a dance studio, I stood there and watched. And that happened 2 days in a row. So the dance teacher pulled me in, and she showed me some dance steps, like a shuffle ball change and a flap heel, 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 and so on. And I caught on to what she showed me. She said, "Little girl, where's your mother?" So I took her to my mother at the dentist's office, and this teacher, her name was, now let me see if I remember, Marie Zernia. She said to my mother, "You should be ashamed of yourself." And my mother thought, what did Janice do? You know, usually I was a very well-behaved child. And she said, "Your daughter should be taking dancing lessons, you know." And so many years later, I actually found out my mother would have loved to have been taking dancing lessons, but in her family it wasn't possible, I guess. But anyway, I had 5 dance lessons, and I made my stage debut in the old band shell at Humboldt Park after having 5 lessons. And I did a song and dance to a tune called The Bowery. So that's how my dance career started. And all the dance teachers that I had moved away either to the east or the west coast. So I was switching studios after Marie Zernia. Then we found Joyce Potter's dance studio on Delaware Avenue, just south of Rusk Avenue. So I was taking lessons there. And she had programs at Humboldt Park. So again, I was dancing at Humboldt Park, and that's while I was in elementary school. And whenever there were programs in the school, I would always be asked to perform. And then Joyce Potter moved to either to the east or west coast. Well, then my mother heard of a studio downtown called Bernice Barbara's Dance Studio. And she was located on Broadway near City Hall. And at that time, streetcars ran on Kinnickinnick Avenue. And so I would take the streetcar, and I was only about 8 years old at the time. But in those days, children could ride the streetcar and not be afraid of things, you know, like today. My gosh, they have shootings in schools. That's terrible. But anyway, then I took from Bernice Barbara, and she also had a sister named Adeline. And Bernice moved to the West Coast. And I thought, is this me, you know? So I took for a while from Adeline, but Adeline was not as graceful as her sister Bernice was. But there was a piano player at their studio named Marie Sturm, and she lived in West Allis. And she quit playing the piano at this studio. She opened up her own dance studio. So then I took lessons from her. I had to take the streetcar over the Miller Valley, and that streetcar was on, real rickety, what do you call those?
Tracks?
Trestles or something, you know. And that streetcar would sway back and forth like this, and I thought, sure, the car was going to fall down into the valley. So I took lessons from her for 2 years. Then she married and she moved away. So there was one more studio called Gelman's. It was a Jewish family, and they had their studio and they lived in the upper part of the building and in the back on 8th and Center. And so, again, I took the streetcar out there, and I think at the time I was maybe, 13, 14 years old. And the whole family, the mother taught acrobatics, the one daughter taught tap, her name was Goldie. Then there was a daughter named Ruth, she taught ballet, and Mr. Gelman taught Spanish castanet dancing. Well, Mr. Gelman was a scary man. He was an alcoholic, and I never liked him. And my mother said, "Well, just learn how to at least play the castanets, you know." So okay, I did, and he would never remember from one week to the next what he taught me. So it got to the point where I would go home and then I would make up my own steps and things, and I'd go back for the lesson and he'd say, "Oh, that's wonderful," you know. So after taking lessons there, I was about 15, and I started teaching on my own in our home on Hillcrest Avenue. And my parents put a big mirror up on the wall, because you had to have a mirror in a dance studio, and a ballet bar, and it took over their whole living room. And they pulled up the carpeting so that I could have tap dancing on the wooden floor. And then I knew this gal from Bayview High School. Her name was Marilyn Harbold. She played the piano, and I always had a live pianist. I didn't like to use records or tapes or anything for the students. So I started teaching while I was 15 years old in Bayview High School. And Mr. Gelman found out that I was teaching. So somehow he got to Bayview, and he saw this, and he reported us to the city because we were in a residential district and had a business. So I had to find a different place to teach, and Oddfellows Hall was on Potter, where McDonald's is now. And so I rented part of a hall there and taught there for a while. And then we finally found a place on Delaware Avenue, the 2995, where Bennett and Delaware and, is that what street goes up to the lake? Anyway, Bennett and Delaware, yeah, that's right. So I had my dance studio there. Then my mother had a bridal and costume shop next door, and she made all of my students' costumes. I wouldn't have anybody else do it because I wanted all those costumes to look the same on my dancers. And then we rented an apartment upstairs. And then my dad actually took out a fireman's license and took care of the furnace in the building and so on. So, and that lasted for quite a few years. And then I had one brother who was 6.5 years younger than I was, and he had been taking lessons from Gilman's also, but then he said, "Why should I take from somebody else when my own sister can teach me how to dance, you know?" So that came about, and then we actually wound up dancing together, tap dancing together, and we called ourselves the Dancing Hansings, because our last name was Hansing, Hansing. And as we grew older, as my brother grew older, between his sophomore and junior year at Bayview High School, he shot up, 1.5 feet. So he became actually taller than I was, which was great, And he was in the band, he played the drums, and when he went back to school in fall, the band director said, "Oh my gosh, we have to find a bigger uniform for you." So they did. But then John and I, my brother, started dancing professionally for the theatrical agents in Milwaukee. And we would dance for different conventions that came into town. They would have their conventions at the Schrader Hotel and all the different wonderful hotels that were here. So that's how my dancing career started. But when I went to Bayview High School, they never had freshmen participate in their operettas that they had. They called them operettas at the time. They would do an operetta in spring and a class play, they called it, in fall. Well, I tried out for the operetta when I was a freshman, and I did a toe dance to, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the, Vienna Woods, I think it was. And the teacher said, "Oh, we'll have you do that as a solo," So that was nice. So then I was in 4 of their operettas, and those were so much fun. And after the operettas were over with, somebody would always have a party at their home for the students and the teachers. And the last operetta that I was in, my parents said that they would have the party on, and we lived on Hillcrest Avenue for the second time. So we had a wonderful, wonderful time. And a lot of those people aren't around anymore. It's a shame. So, but that was my dancing career. I still taught after I had 2 children, because my brother had opened a studio on Kinnickinnick Avenue between Potter and what is that, Rusk or something? It was across, the Mirth Theater was there, and it was across from the Mirth Theater. It was on the east side of the street.
Delaware.
Is it Delaware?
Oh, no. Mirth on KK.
Yeah, it was on KK. Anyway, we moved into Dover.
Dover
Oh,
and
yeah,
KK?
Dover and Potter. That was it. No. It was Potter, and then coming south, Russell. Potter and Russell Avenue on the east side of Kinnickinnick Avenue. And we had just moved into our home in 1961, and I had our oldest daughter, Linda, who was 2 at the time, and then I had our son, Greg, who was, 4 months old. And my brother and his wife took a belated honeymoon to Europe that year. They were married in January of 1961. And he married a Bayview gal named Beth Brickhouse. And that's a big name in Bayview also. And he asked me if I would take over his studio for him. And I said, "Oh my gosh, John, but we just moved into our house. I have to get things prepared, and I have the 2 children." Well, it worked out. My mother came and helped quite a bit with getting the house organized. And then it turned out that a gal that I had taught dancing lessons to on Delaware Avenue was going to Bayview High School. And Bayview High School was just 4 blocks east of us. And I asked her if she could come and take care of the children while I was teaching. And she said, oh, sure, you know. So that worked out fine. So anyway, those were some of the things that happened while I was in Bayview.
So how long did you have your studio? You said you had your own studio, a couple different locations, and then you said your brother had one. When did you stop having one? Like when you got your children, or how far before that?
No, it was after I had the children, and then, in fact, when I had our third child, then I actually gave up the studio. So,
okay.
yeah.
And a little postscript, that place on Delaware and Bennett
Yeah.
that you had, we talked about this before, very haunted. It's got a,
Yes.
no, seriously, it's got a history of a lot of paranormal activity.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
talked about that, but you don't remember any of the scary stuff that supposedly went on.
No, it wasn't at that time, you know. It was crazy.
It became a beauty shop, and
Yeah.
the women who worked there reported a lot of
Yes.
very,
Yeah.
very strange things. They even had those paranormal people come in. What do you call those people? Psychic people would
Oh,
measure
yeah.
all sorts of
Yeah.
wavelengths and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, a lot of
Yeah.
weird stuff happened.
See,
but
at
you
the
don't-
time, where the beauty shop was, right on the corner, it was a restaurant.
Right.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, it was
Yeah.
a restaurant.
Yes.
Was that after you were there? It became
No,
a
no,
restaurant?
it was during, Jean Augustine was the owner of the restaurant. And my brother became very good friends with Jean and his wife's children. And my brother loved to fish and hunt. When he went to high school, because he was a dancer, the guys thought he was a sissy. So he got into a couple little skirmishes and actually knocked the teeth out of one boy just to prove his masculinity. But he was wonderful. I'll never forget when my mother brought him home from the hospital. I had wanted a sister, but when I saw him, and he was a big baby, he was 9.5 pounds. He was gorgeous, and I said, "Oh, Mom, we'll keep him." So, but he was a great brother. He was a great brother. He passed away in 2010. It was a week before Thanksgiving that he died. He lived out at Okachi Lake, and he opened a studio in Oconomowoc, and his oldest daughter, Lisa, now has the studio. It's called the Hanson School of Dance.
So it's interesting, by you just looking in a window one day and seeing some people dance,
Mm-hmm.
you end up having your own different dance studios. Your brother got into dance, and now your niece still has a dance studio. So just from that
Oh,
moment,
Yeah.
looking in that window
Yeah.
changed.
yeah, yeah.
I remember seeing you on television, though.
Oh,
What pro-
yes. Oh, well, we appeared on TV quite often, but when WTMJ Channel 4 went into color television, we were on the first colored television show. And the theme of the show was like a circus sideshow. So we dressed in little Western type costumes, and John and I did a tap dance. We tap danced together. And then we did some exhibition ballroom dancing, but it was mostly tap dancing that we did.
Do you remember what year that was that you were on television?
Ooh, gosh.
It had to be in obviously
It
in the
was
50s.
in the 50s, yeah. Probably. When did color television start? 58, 59, something like that? I'm not quite sure.
Not everyone had a color television right away.
No,
So,
no,
I don't know.
yeah.
You talked a little bit about dancing in Humboldt Park, like at the old band shell. Do you want to talk more about Humboldt Park, or your memories of that, or in regards to dancing, or anything in general? Like, I mean, you
Well-
lived right around. Well,
When when Humboldt Park on the 4th of July, they'd always have an afternoon program. And the schools would participate with the program. And I was always in those programs. And then, oh gosh, there was always a parade. And I twirled the baton also. And so I was always in the Humboldt Park 4th of July parade in the morning. I would perform in the afternoon. And when we moved into our home, then my parents were members of the Humboldt Park 4th of July Association. And when we moved across from Humboldt Park, I thought, oh, gee, I'm going to join the association, you know. So I did that, and then I was chairman of the doll buggy parade that they would have in the afternoon. And I was a judge for the afternoon talent show several times. So, you know, it was nice living right across from the park.
Was the parade in the morning the same as how they have it now, where it comes down Kinnickinnick and goes into
Yes.
the park?
Yeah.
Yes.
And they still have the talent shows and things like that as well, don't they? It's
Yes.
pretty much.
Yeah.
So I've gone to some of that stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is there other things you used to do in the park that people still do there or are different there? Or?
Well, we used to ice skate a lot. I don't know if they still ice skate the
And
way
they do.
they
They
did.
do.
Do they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know they play hockey over
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're right across from the hill that they can sled down, and that's so much fun to watch the sledding, you
Mhm.
know.
And the boats, they used to have the boats in the Humboldt Park Lagoon?
They don't have those anymore.
No, but they did.
They did.
They did.
So you
Yes.
remember? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did you just
Yeah.
rent those? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we'd rent them. Yes. Yeah, that was a lovely park. A lovely park. And then also South Shore Park was when they had the first South Shore Frolic Parade. Another gal, in fact, Audrey Quincy, who lived in this house.
Mhm.
She and I met each other at an exercise class at Bayview High School. And she knew that I had been a dancer or was a dancer. And she said, oh, Janice, if I've got a group of ladies together, would you teach them how to tap dance? And I said, sure, you know. So she got this group of ladies together, and we practiced at the Beulah Britton Center. And she said, oh, wouldn't it be fun to march in parades? And I thought, oh boy. So I taught them a couple different routines, marching routines, and we had a record player, and then someone would be driving the car, and the record would be playing with a
And the name of the
loudspeaker.
group was?
The Dancing Grannies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've heard of them.
Yes.
They were
yeah.
great.
And the first frolic parade that we marched in, we won a trophy for the best. What was it? Original unit or something like that. Did I donate the trophy to the society?
Would you know, John?
Do you know?
I know we
I'd have to check
We have your
upstairs.
album of the Dancing
Oh,
Grannies,
yes.
and we all the
Yeah.
pictures, but I don't
Yeah.
remember a trophy.
Oh, I'll have
What's
to
your
look.
throat?
Do you remember at all? I guess you would have been quite young because the rolling mill. I think they knocked it down in 1939.
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you remember anything about that? at
No,
all, or-
not really.
No.
No. We did go to the, they have that big sign, and we did go to the dedication of that. And they had entertainment there, but I wasn't involved with
Oh, okay.
any of that.
You mentioned your mother worked for a dentist and then had a dress shop or clothes making shop. What about your father? What was the
Oh,
what brought them to Bayview originally?
my dad was an automobile mechanic, and he worked for Venus Motors, which was on Packard Avenue at the time, and it was just a very small garage. Now it's on Layton Avenue, and I think those are sons of Mr. Venus, because Mr. Venus is gone, and of course so are my parents. But my parents were opposites. My dad was quiet and very gentle, and my mother was a go-getter, and she wouldn't back down for anybody. But they got along beautifully together. And then, my dad finally retired. So, but they moved. He never made a lot of money, And my mother worked at Gimbel's downtown in the corset department. So the reason that they moved, they probably weren't making too much money. This was back in the 30s and during the Depression years and whatnot, the Second World War. So, but I had a good life. I had a good life. So.
Is there anything that sticks out most to you about living in Bayview that you like most about being here over all the years?
Well, seeing I moved back here after living here for, as a child, it's the people, it's a friendly area, and I just like coming back to where I grew up, so.
Where did you live before you moved back to Bayview?
Oh, when Dick and I were married, we lived in the Bon Air Apartments on Prospect Avenue. And I'll never forget, the rent that we paid was $80 a month. Well, when my dad heard that amount, he thought that was a terrific amount of money. And this was back in 1956. So we'll be married 63 years, May 26th. But I said, well, Dad, Dick had, and my husband had a service station. First he worked for a fella named Irv on Houghton and Lloyd. It was a Pate station at the time. And then that Irv went out of business and my husband took over the business. So that's when gas was 19 cents a gallon. And he worked, and then I still had the studio, so we were able to afford $80 a month for rent, And then from there, we moved over to 51st and Lloyd and lived in an upper flat. And then that's where I had our daughter Linda and, our son Greg. And then when we decided that we could afford to buy a house, then we moved here to Bayview. And we paid $14,500 for our house. Isn't that something? Back in 1961. So.
Gil, are there any questions that
No. No, I think you've covered everything.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about Bayview, or?
Well, when this organization was being organized
Sure, you want to talk.
by Audrey Quincy and Paul Kolbeck, and I knew Paul. My brother was a friend of Paul's, and they went to high school together. So when they organized it, I thought, oh my gosh, I've lived in Bayview practically all my life. I certainly would like to join the organization. So I'm a charter member and became involved with the archives with Audrey Quincy and Lois Rayberg, and they're both gone. There was another gal, Karen Lill, and I think I just saw her death notice now a couple months ago in the paper. But when we got together for the archive committee, we had just a little room at the Beulah Britton Center upstairs. And then we moved over to St. Mary's, and we worked in a room over there, and then the association bought the house, and then we came over here. So,
Is there any memories over this 40-year span that stand out the most about things you enjoy doing with the Historical Society, or?
Paul would organize bus trips to different areas in Wisconsin, and they would be historical areas. We've gone to Madison and, Oshkosh and different places, and those were always fun to do. And Paul was quite a character. His wife and my brother's wife are sisters, the Brick House girls. Barbara is Paul's wife, and Beth was my brother's wife. And both men are gone, so Barbara and Beth are widows. And they travel together quite a bit. Beth has always been a traveler. She would set up trips, and my brother would just go. And she still does that. But now she takes her sister Barbara with her, which is nice. But Paul was quite an entertainer, and we had an entertainment troupe along with my brother and I dancing. And he would dress up as Sophie Tucker. I don't know if you know that gal, big woman, and Paul was a big man. And he'd sing, "Some one of these days," you know. She had this real low voice. He was just a character. And he'd actually march in the Frolic Parade with our group, dressed as Sophie Tucker. So it was fun. It was fun.
Janice, can you talk a little bit about, you've been in the neighborhood for so long. How's it changed over time? What were your...
Well, Kinnickinnick Avenue has changed quite a bit, especially near Bayview High School, Humboldt Park has not changed. South Shore Park, we used to go sledding there, and now there's that playground at South Shore Park, which there wasn't, but the beach at South Shore Park was nice to go swimming in. But other than that, it really hasn't changed that much, There are different stores. And of course now you have busing for the schools, and otherwise they were always neighborhood schools, But other than that, it's still a nice place to live.
So any other questions, anyone else? Anything else you want to say, Janice, before we wrap it up?
I can't think of anything.
Okay.
Oh, what about your career as a dresser for the ballet?
Oh,
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh dear.
How could you forget that?
Oh gosh. Well, probably because it doesn't have anything to do with Bayview.
But still.
Yeah. I have always liked dancing, and when the ballet company was formed, I bought season tickets, and before one of the shows, the wardrobe mistress was having like a style show for one of for the new Swan Lake that they were doing. So I asked my daughter Linda if she would like to go to that before we went to see the ballet, and she said, "Oh yes." So we went to the Marcus Center, and they had the style show upstairs. And after the style show, I went up to the wardrobe mistress and I said, "How does one become a dresser?" She said, you volunteered. And I said, oh, okay, I would like to volunteer. And she looked me up and down, and she said, and at the time I was wearing a skirt, and she said, well, it looks like you have pretty strong legs. So she said, I always need volunteers for the Nutcracker. I said, okay, and so I gave her my name and my telephone number. Well, a day later, she called and said, do you think you could come in and help for the Swan Lake? And I said, oh, sure. So, that was quite an experience, because the main ballerina, her name was Michelle Lucci. She was a diva. And if you didn't hook her up fast enough, and she wiggled around, and if the girls wiggle around when you're trying to hook them up, it's pretty hard to hook them up. So, but I actually had to dress her, and I was scared silly because I had seen her dance, and oh God, she was a beautiful dancer, but very, So, but she was married to the director, who was Ted Kivett at the time. Now that, I'm trying to think when that was, back in 1984, something like that. So I've been a dresser ever since. And then we were put on the payroll, which was very, very nice. And I'm still doing that. In fact, there's a ballet coming up the beginning of April. And I have the schedule for that one. So, that's quite an experience.
And how about Mrs. Nearing? Mrs. Nearing is the wife of the man who owns Grappies.
Right.
She also is a former prima ballerina of the Milwaukee Ballet.
Anne Finch. Yes.
And she is her favorite hooker.
Yes.
Yes,
Anne said I was their favorite hooker. And he proposed to her on the stage after one of the performances. Yes. So that was real neat,
As a tiny little postscript, years ago, when the Nearings bought the place, Mrs. Nearings, you shop at Grappies, I assume. Lovely, lovely woman, and we talked, and our birthdays are the same. At any rate, we're a day apart.
Oh.
And I went to some lunch up. Nutcracker has the little buffet or breakfast for the children.
Yes.
And I took my granddaughter there, and there's Mrs. Nearing, and I said, "Oh, look, there's a lady from Grappies," and she said, I used to be known as the former prima ballerina of the Milwaukee Ballet. The lady from Grappies.
Right.
Yes. And I mentioned that I knew you, and she said, Janice is my favorite hooker.
Yeah, she was a nice gal. Most of them were nice. This Michelle Lucci, like I said, she was a prima ballerina, but the ballet had gone to Chicago one year and they were doing Swan Lake, and somehow when we checked into the hotel, Maribel Potter was the wardrobe mistress at the time, and she used to live in Bayview. But anyway, somehow the wallet was stolen out of my purse as I was checking in to the hotel. And at the theater, I don't know how everybody found out about it, but Michelle said, if you need any money at all, I'll be happy to help you. Well, I thought, oh, she has a heart. And then 2 months later, my wallet was sent back to me from California. I don't know how somebody found, the money was gone, but the wallet was there. Everything else was in it except the money. And I don't know how that ever happened. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right. Any other questions, though, Gail?
I think we're good.
Anything else you want to say?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, thanks for coming in. and
Oh,
doing
this
it.
was fun.
Yeah.
This was fun. Thank you for having me.